Hello, welcome to my review of American Tank Ace 1944 to 1945. This is a solitaire game designed by Gregory Smith and released by Compass Games. This game is really quite similar to the good old Patton's Best. I don't remember when this was released, I think in the 80s. This is one of my favorite games, and I will compare the two games a little bit later on. I really do like narrative solitaire games, and that's basically what this is. You take control of your tank with all your crew, try to gain experience and really try to survive. And here we have most of the components of the game. There are two mounted mat boards. The top one here isn't really used very much, but it gives kind of an idea of the geography of the war through Europe and has a sequence of play, but I often found I have my counter sheets on top of that and really don't use it. But the sequence of play is quite nice to have. The other main board we have is the battle board, which is used in your missions. You have units, enemy units around you, and there's a little bit of movement, although it's really quite abstract how you can maneuver against your enemy, but it works quite well and simplifies things. Also gives you some information about the type of mission and the terrain and the weather. We then also have, mind the glare here, we do have these tank cards. You can control 10 different tanks, and this is really the main board you use during the game to keep track of your ammunition, status of your crew, and your orders, and some of your special abilities. We also have the infamous for Greg's Games, the dress-up doll, I believe some people call it. It's really just for looks. You can keep track of all this on a piece of paper. I sometimes do that. It just shows you some of your prestige and experience that you earn through the game. And in this game special, you have these war trophies that you can gather. We also have quite a lot of counters to keep some in bags and in a counter tray here. Got a lot of possible enemies. And this is one thing, I mean, the counters are good quality. I would have liked if these enemies were slightly bigger, because it's actually some nice artwork on there, but it's so small I can barely see it. And likewise with the enemy infantry, they've made different art for the different, you can have SS or Volksgrenadiers, Volkssturm, but it's really hard to see the difference because they're quite small. That would have just been nice to not kind of waste the good artwork on small counters. I think, as often happens in these games for some reason, the log sheets that come with the game are lacking at best. This is a game where you take control of one tank with 5 men inside, and there's not even room to write the names of your people here. So, as often happens, you have to resort to Board Game Geek, where I go, or maybe it's possible also on Facebook or other sites where other people have actually made some more usable log sheets to try and keep track of things. I'm surprised how many games are published with very, very poor log sheets. I mean, this is good enough to use, but it really seems a shame with a game that's all about your crew that you can't actually follow your crew on the supplied log sheet. Last thing of the components are these player aids, which I think are really good. They are laid out quite logically, where usually the one type, for example, this sheet is usually only used when you start the mission. It's all about what the enemies are and what the terrain and weather is for that day. So you use this at the very beginning, and then you don't really need that for the rest of the game. or that mission I should say. And then when you actually get into combat, you just use this one sheet almost. They work really well. There's also on the back of the rule book a nice sequence of play. Unfortunately, there's some mistakes on it with the order, which is a bit unfortunate. And that brings me to sort of the actual rule book, which does have some decent amount of pictures in it, but otherwise the rule book I find is a bit lacking. It's not the most logical, and even though these are luckily quite simple rules, finding something, you seem to remember a rule about something and then actually finding it in the rule book is difficult. And there are now 2 pages of clarifications and errata, which is a shame. I think they could have done some more work on the rule book. And one thing I think is kind of odd is there's a example of play given in the rule book, but it's kind of an odd example of play because in this example your tank is taken out before you get to give a single order to your crew. So it is a very short and not very useful example of play, because you don't get to play, your tank is blown to bits in the very first round. Whereas I think it's a bit of a lost opportunity, because if they had written a slightly longer example of play, maybe some of all the clarifications that are now in a separate document in an errata, they could have been brought into this example of play and caused less confusion for new players. So I will say, despite I think that the rulebook is a bit lacking, Gregory Smith is extremely responsive on Board Game Geek, maybe Facebook as well, I'm not sure about that. But there are a lot of people who have asked questions in there, including me, and Greg is very quick to answer them and explain how to use the game, so top marks for that. So during your missions, you will roll for which type of mission it is. It can be an attack, assault, move to combat, and defend, I think, are the different options. And there's some different effects that has the game, whether the Germans lie in ambush on you and shoot the first round, or if they are attacking you, you're in a defensive position. There's also weather effects and the terrain. You can be in bocage or woods or urban areas. And a lot of the game is set up on this sort of abstract battle board, where you will be placing the enemies around you, the tanks and self-propelled guns. They might move down to try and flank you and take a shot of your side where your armor is weaker. You can also make attempts at flanking the enemy tanks to try and hit them, because some of the German tanks you really have no chance against their frontal armor. And you control it all, as I said earlier, with your tank card here, where you keep track of your ammunition, and you give orders from your tank commander, usually 2 orders in every round. And this is all really nice and quick. A mission can be played in 10-15 minutes, unless I've had a couple of missions that ended up in a bit of slugging matches where it was just difficult for me to hit and penetrate an enemy. I think it was a self-propelled gun especially, and they got a couple of reinforcements. But I still think these missions are often shorter than they were in Patton's Best, where I've had missions there that took hours to play because they kept getting reinforcements. That's a little better leveled in this game, where Greg has tried to make it so that you don't end up in a loop of constant enemy reinforcements, which is a good thing because that can really make it drag out. So these games are pretty short, which I like. It's also a fairly small footprint of the game. So this is something that with me, with my time and space limitations, this means that I can get this out on and play much more often than I will Patents Best. So in the game you also earn experience and prestige points. The prestige is kind of used to get new tanks. I have just got this jumbo tank. I'm now, I believe, on something like my 25th mission. I just had my last tank shot out, so this is my 5th tank. And luckily I am prestige level 4, so I can get this jumbo version which has pretty thick armor and hopefully will increase my survivability. And the experience point you earn can be used for different, I apologize for the glare, but you can get different abilities. I'm an expert in the M4. I could have a gunner with better gunnery abilities, a driver who's better at finding hold down positions and things like that. There is a thing about that I find lacking compared to Patents Best, and that is you only earn experience points, usually 1 experience point for every 3 successful missions. And it just means that even though you're actually 5 people in this tank, it is very slow going with getting some of these extra abilities and really increasing your survivability. I think that was better handled in Patents Best, where each person has kind of a level almost. But there's a trade-off there that's also more complex and needs more die roll and all that, so I can understand why the decisions were made for this, but I feel like that could have been done a little differently so that you just have a better, your people get some abilities a bit sooner, so that you actually feel like your whole tank as a unit is getting better. So during the missions, the combat is really all down to rolling on these couple of different tables. It's mostly just with 2d6, and it goes really nice, quick and smooth, especially with these nice player aids that are laid out. So for most of the combat, you're really just using one side, and this goes both with when I fire at the enemy and when they fire at me. It's the same tables. It makes it really quite nice and easy, quite smooth. And so what are my thoughts? That was a very quick overview of the game. I think that despite the rulebook really could have used some more work, but there is a very good game here. So I urge people who want to try this to just kind of stick with it. Look on Board Game Geek, certainly get the errata and clarification document that's out there, and just kind of stick with it, and very quickly you will end up hardly ever actually needing to look in the rule book. Only if some little specific unusual event occurs do you really need it. Most of the time I can play this game with just the player aids and maybe the back of the rule book with the sequence of battle there. This game strikes a really good balance, I think, between complexity, where Patents Best is great but extremely complex and has a lot of die rolling, whereas it's faster paced, it's quick to just play an hour or less an evening, and really just is a good fun game. As I just said, I wish there was a slightly better handling of crew experience, but all in all I think this is a top-notch game, and urge people to try it out. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just making a little add-on here to my review. I finished and didn't complete the editing of it, and I played another mission, this time in a brand new jumbo, which gives me much better defensive armor. And this next mission, I'll just show you what happened. I thought really illustrates some of the decisions you might have to make during one of these games. Sometimes it's the missions are pretty simple. If there's just some infantry, half-tracks, trucks, they are no great danger to you and pretty easy to take out. But sometimes you come up against a bigger foe, and this mission right here really showed some of the tactical decisions that I had to make. So this mission was in the woods. It was a clear day, so there was no rain, nothing there. But because it's woods, you start at medium range. And what I came up against was a half-track over here in Zone A, and then a tiger. The first time I've been up against one of these, and it is a nasty opponent. And he also set up here in Zone A. So in the first round, the half-track starts by dismounting infantry. And luckily the tiger doesn't take a shot at me from the get-go. Now I have to decide what to do. So if I back up to long range, then I have no chance of taking out the tiger. Right now, at medium range, I have a chance if I hit his hull. But if I go to close range, that increases my chance a little bit, but I still actually can't take out the tiger by hitting the turret. And at close range, he will be able to take out my turret, whereas here at medium range, my turret makes me safer, not completely safe, but safer. So in the end, I decide to stay at medium range. So I have 2 shots per round, but as soon as I start shooting at the tiger, then he will shoot at me. And so I kind of want to be sure that I have 2 shots at him, but right now, because usually I go into missions with high explosive loaded, and that is not going to help me much against the tiger. So I have to change that. And I decided to try and get into a better defensive position. So I make an attempt to go hull down, and I actually succeed, which was pretty lucky. So I move up, and I'm now hull down to the tiger, which means that he cannot hit my hull, which it makes me quite a bit safer. And then I also spend the second action of that round to change my loaded ammunition to armor piercing. So then in the second round, the half-track actually starts shooting at me, but the infantry doesn't, and luckily the tiger doesn't either. Despite the half-track shooting at me, I still decide to keep my commander unbuttoned just to improve my shot. It makes it a little dangerous, but I really want my shots to count against that tiger. So now I take my first shot at the tiger, but I don't have a great chance of actually knocking him out. If I hit the turret, then nothing happens. When I hit the hull, then I can take him out, but it's not that great of a chance. But I try anyway, take a shot, and luckily I get him immobilized. It's better than nothing. But now I have to decide what to do. Do I take a second shot with fairly small chance of actually knocking him out? Or what else do I do? I realize in this jumbo my ready rack is actually really small, so I now only have 1 more armor piercing which went into the gun, and I now have no more armor piercing in my ready rack. So instead of shooting with small chance of actually knocking out the tiger, I decide to go defensive. So I throw some smoke from my smoke mortar to try and hide a little bit here. And now, just to make things worse, in the random events, a self-propelled gun, a Hetzer, shows up over here in C, which is definitely not great. So now both the half-track and the tiger shoots at me, but luckily they both miss because they are shooting through smoke. And here in the random events of this round, I got really lucky. My friendly fire took out the Hetzer, so I don't have to worry about him. That would really have caused trouble. And then here in the second round, third round, I think this is now, the smoke dissipates a little bit, and I get my loader to load armor piercing into the ready rack. So I'm ready to try and knock out that tiger. And I have my driver, I think my assistant driver was buttoned up actually. My driver also buttons up, so he's safe. But I keep my commander out so I can increase my chances of hitting. So now both the half-track and the tiger take another shot at me. Luckily, again, the smoke saves me and they miss. And in the next round, the smoke is all gone. And I decide to try and move to a flank shot. So usually when you do that, it's really only the first shot you have that counts as a flank shot, where I'll shoot against the tiger side. But because he's immobilized, he will stay flanked, which is a great thing for me. So if I miss, I will still be able to shoot at his side. Luckily, I succeed in moving to the flank shot, and on my very first shot, I actually hit him and knock out the tiger, which was really quite incredible. The half-track shoots at me then, luckily misses. Then in the next round, I take a shot at the half-track, and the very first shot, I take out the half-track. After seeing the tiger and half-track destroyed in a matter of seconds, the infantry wisely decides to retreat. And that was a successful mission. So I hope this just shows a little bit of some of all the decisions that you actually sometimes have to make in this game, that I was thinking about, do I close range or not? How do I do with keeping my commander? It really helps with accuracy of shooting to stay unbuttoned, but with the machine gun shooting at me constantly, he's also in great danger. This time it all worked out, and I got lucky. Unfortunately, in the very next mission, once again, believe it or not, another tiger showed up, and I was not so lucky. My tactics didn't work then, and all but 2 of my crew members were killed in action. But I hope you enjoyed this little video, and see you later.